Vice Provost International Murali Chandrasekaran, who is going to give the word of welcome for UBC. And we're very pleased that Murali could find a few minutes before a big budget meeting to play this important role. And as you probably know, Murali is leading the international strategy for UBC, and it's a strategy that's rooted in the SDGs and a sense of global citizenship. So it's going to tell you more. Welcome, Murali.
Morning, everybody. I first want to acknowledge that we gather here today on the traditional, ancestral, and unceded lands of the Musqueam people. And this room in particular is, the Musqueam gave us a name for this room, the room of plenty, many trees, in Musqueam, Sasikit. I've always enjoyed coming to this room, and especially the discussions that we've had in this room, many of those thanks to Yves Tiberghien. I want to first acknowledge Yves for his amazing enthusiasm and passion to bring together people from many disciplines, from many parts of the world, so that we can all collectively learn about things that's happening in the world. So thank you, Yves, and could you join me in thanking Yves for all of this? How do you introduce somebody who needs no introduction? I will try, but before I do, I just want to say a couple of thoughts around the international strategy that Yves mentioned. It's perhaps a little trite to say that even as globalization and technological advances continue to fuel growth in global GDP and prosperity in many countries, we continue to live in an era of astounding inequality. There's the gap between the rich and the poor countries continues to widen, posing a very profound threat toward peace. For many developing countries, this is a very critical time. Infrastructure and institutional voids of many forms makes it difficult for these countries to accelerate in many areas, such as reduction in poverty, access to education, water, food, energy, healthcare, access to decent work and economic growth, and disaster-resilient infrastructure in ways that developed countries have been able to do. At the same time, the scale of human migration, the flow of human capital, financial capital, ideas across national boundaries is at an all-time high. But unless there's an attempt to reduce some of these infrastructural, institutional voids, the goals that are outlined in the Sustainable Development Goals, the UN SDGs, will continue to remain elusive. And a central part of the SDGs is around SDG 17, which is Partnerships for Goals. And this is an important sentiment that is threaded through the UBC's international strategy. The international strategy recognizes that universities bear significant potential and indeed responsibility to bring knowledge, talent, and convening power to address, along with other global institutions, the pressing development needs of our planet and help build a more just, prosperous, sustainable, and thriving world. Now, as universities, we've long committed ourselves to engaging with these complex challenges from multidisciplinary points of view. And indeed, such institutions are now more than ever before in a position to add value in capacity building and convening impactful partnerships to address these broad and profound challenges related to the economy, related to society, and related to the biosphere. And we should indeed want to engage with corporates, communities, cities, and countries to tackle this range of global challenges that are relevant for all of us, both local and global context. And we've learned over the years that the impact of universities can be amplified through collaboration and sharing of this talent, knowledge, and experience. And indeed, this form of collaboration, the university's international strategy is calling out from the perspective of humility as opposed to hubris, from the perspective of engagement as opposed to estrangement. And so against this background, I could not be more excited about the fact that we have someone of the caliber of Pascal Lamy to give us this amazing gift of time, to come here to the campus and share his thoughts with us. He could be doing so many things today. And he has so many things that I wondered when I met him the day before yesterday, I asked him when he slept. But in the midst of that, he has chosen to give us his time. And for that, I'm extremely grateful. Now, he's been at the forefront of global economic politics for 4 decades and has had a tremendous impact in building a rules-based trading system. It's easy to say that he's visionary and has been part of many leading groups thinking about the future of global governance and world affairs, including environmental and social issues. And he's an action-oriented guy who likes to get things done, as opposed to think about them. And that's pretty unique in a global context. He's currently the president of the Paris Peace Forum, which is one of the boldest efforts on the planet to encourage and stimulate a large number of grassroots global governance initiatives and then to scale them up with the aim to building a better planet. His many initiatives interact tremendously well with our new international strategy working towards global citizenship and informed connectivity for this networked world in which we live. We hope that this visit will be a great starting point, Monsieur Lamy, for a great partnership between UBC and the Paris Peace Forum, and indeed with you. And I look forward to hearing about how this event went. Between listening to Pascal Lamy and not being in the room when the budget meeting is happening, I have chosen to go after the money and to get things done. And so I apologize, but I'm sure that I will hear about it from Eve as well. Please join me in welcoming Pascal Lamy.
Thank you very much, Murali, for this gift of time as well, and the kind words. I'll just add just a couple words before we jump in. I also will mention a couple administrative issues. So we're going to live stream this event. That means that if you ask questions, it's going to be public, so we'll put this on the record. Also, I want to mention in terms of the bio, Pascal Lamy has been the Director General of WTO for 2 terms, from 2005 to 2012. At critical times for WTO, a critical time of debates on the future of globalization. He has had a front row seat at G20 meetings, during the financial crisis, all kinds of global summits. Before that, he was EU Commissioner for Trade. That means essentially Minister of Trade. Trade is the one area where the EU is unified, so handling all trade negotiations from 1999 to 2005. And also in the late 80s and early 90s, he was the Chief of Staff for Jacques Delors, the most influential commissioner that the EU had, the one who sort of was the architect of Maastricht Treaty, but also the Euro. But Pascal Lamy is also, a visionary. As you know, he's president of the Paris Peace Forum. He's on the board of a very large number of foundations, including many foundations working on ethical issues, environmental issues, social issues. For example, he's very, very active in a very large project to protect the Antarctica, the environmental ecosystem of the Antarctica. He's also, just to mention, I just picked one, president of the board of the Association of Musicians of Le Louvre. To show you that his interests carry into music, among many things. So it's a great, great honor to have Pascal here. He is indeed at any moment of the day, on any part of the planet, having huge impact around the world. So it's a great, great honor having you here. Thank you.
Well, good morning, good afternoon, everybody. Many thanks for this invitation. Many thanks for the kind words of Vice Provost, and many thanks to Eva for having taken this initiative. We operate in various circles, as he said, and it happened that from time to time, if the Berlin circle cross mine. Most of the time it's in China, by the way, but I'm happy that this time it's here in Vancouver. Globalization, which is today's theme, has been the main transformation of the world for several decades. What I call globalization, for the purpose of this discussion, is a phase, and there were others, and there probably will be others in the future, a phase of expansion of market capitalism, resulting in an intensification of international exchange, whether trade, goods, services, capital, or people. Now, for quite some time, the view had prevailed that this new reality we live in, and which is unprecedented, would be the new normal, would prevail in the future, even if there might have been here or there a few dissenting opinions. But more recently, and especially since the 2008 financial crisis, the mood has changed. According to some, the growing economic, social, political turbulences, which we now have on this planet, should or will result in deglobalization, so to reverse globalization, with the world becoming more fragmented rather than more united, at least on the economic side. Some like it, others do not like it. Some see deglobalization as the solution to some of our problems, and others see globalization as a danger, which, if it was to happen, would handicap finding solutions to the problems we have. So in order to try and shed some light on this major debate and to introduce our discussion, I'll make 3 points. The first one, which is to look at the main shaping factors of globalization as we've seen it for the last 3 or 4 decades. Second one will be to look at why harnessing globalization has proven so difficult and to a large extent unsuccessful. And the third point will be to try and look at how we could do better in harnessing globalization in the times to come. Now, starting with why did we have this wave of globalization, which, by the way, succeeded other waves of globalization in human history. 2 main shaping factors, in my view. 1, technology, and 2, ideology. Technology, which I believe remains the main engine of globalization, in that, like previous waves of globalization in history, it's a jump, a leap forward in how do you address transport, which has created the present wave. There was a wave following leaps in technology about sailing, one about steam, one about electricity, one about aviation. This one is basically about IT. And each of these waves has gone in one direction, and there's never been a move back, which is reducing the cost of distance. And reducing the cost of distance is alleviating the main obstacle to more human, international, inter-society exchanges, which used to be distance. And we are now reaching a stage where roughly, if not now, a few years from now, the cost of distance will be zero. We're not yet totally there, but that's the direction. And of course, this had a huge influence on the way our economic systems work. Second basic engine, ideology. And what I mean by ideology is a sort of global consensus in the way people think, according to which opening international exchange is the way to go. With goods, services, capital, people, the globalization ideology is we are moving in a better world with globalization than without globalization. And this is based on a series of theories, experiences, results. The most basic one being this sort of Ricardian principle that if I do something better than you do, and if you do something better than I do, we have a rational interest to exchange. I will benefit from where you are better than I am. You will benefit from where I am better than you are. It's a win-win situation, it's efficient, and in a market capitalist system, this is rational and basically true. Which is why the world economy has transformed so rapidly from production systems of goods and services which were mainly national, with some respiration with other nations, to this world global supply chain which spanned the whole planet. And the reason why this has happened is that because of crushing the cost of distance, a larger choice in the way you localize your production system is available, and international division of labor, which becomes very easy, both because of technology and because public policies have gone in the direction of removing a number of obstacles to trade which were impeding this multilocalization, have taken place. So globalization, according to this view, is there because it's efficient. But the reality, and if that was not highlighted by Mr. Ricardo, it was highlighted by Mr. Schumpeter, the reality is that the reason why it's efficient is that it is painful. Going back to the simple Ricardian exchange rationale, if we trade the way I suggested we should, the people in your constituency doing what I do better than them will likely not be that happy. And the other way around, the people in my constituency doing what you do better than I do, the moment we start exchanging, will not be happy because of competition. they would have to change the way they operate, different allocations of production factors, capital, people will have to adjust. And of course, like any transformation of economic system, this has social consequences. So, the reality is that this model, which I simplify into a simple Ricardian Schumpeterian model, this model is efficient and painful. It's efficient because it's painful, and it's painful because it's efficient. And this is the fundamental paradigm of globalization for quite a long time, while recognizing this sort of winner-loser pain-gain equation. The prevailing view has been that the benefits of efficiency outweigh the cost of pain. This has been the prevailing view, and this is probably what is now changing. Why are we now, and that's my second point, why are we now in a situation where this relatively rosy picture is now in doubt? I think there are several reasons to that. Not that it has not worked. The positive effects of globalization have happened. This integration of the world economy, this growing interconnection through multi-localization of production systems has created many, many losers. And it's true that this period has seen hundreds of millions of people out of poverty, which was in this speed and in this proportion totally unprecedented in human history. So there is a clear, huge benefit in poverty reduction, starting with Asia, which is where the explosion of supply chains has been the most manifest, although Europe, for other reasons, had already started going in this direction in the 60s and the 70s. So, undoubtedly a huge plus, as could be expected, but also a minus, as could be expected, except that the minus has probably become bigger than expected, and for some, bigger than the plus, which is basically in an increase of inequalities. So, huge reduction of poverty, but important increase in inequalities, and notably in the West, which was the previous hegemon in the world economy, and where globalization impacted production systems in such a way that traditional welfare systems, which had been built in the West to cope with this sort of transformation, with this sort of violence, and they were invented in the 19th century in the previous wave of globalization that accompanied the Industrial Revolution. In the West, these welfare systems have proven not to be able to properly cope with the winner-loser equation, hence generating economic and social hardship for some, hence generating political reactions, which is why we have this anti-globalization backlash in part of the way. Not that, if you look at US, Europe, Japan, North America, countries like Canada, not that a majority of the population has turned anti-globalization, but a small minority has become stiffer, more determined, more vocal, looking for protection from what they see as a process that has unduly damaged their own existence, Hence the rise of anti-trade populist movements. This is so far limited to the Western world, and as I said, to a part of the Western world, but still it is a very active political constituency, and we've seen the result of that in the election of Mr. Trump, or even in the Brexit vote in 2016. This phase of globalization has also produced other transformations which give to some the impression that this is not the way to go. For instance, growing concern about the environment, which is a feature of modern politics, and which some connect to globalization. For some people, globalization is damaging the environment, whether it's climate change, whether it's degradation of biodiversity, oceans and the rest, and globalization is the culprit. This wave of globalization has also resulted in a major rebalancing of world powers, geopolitics, with a relative decline of the pre-existing hegemon in the United States of America and the rise of China. You don't need to be a specialist in human history to understand that what Thucydides wrote a long time ago in Greece, which is that these reshuffling of major power never happens nicely, and that most of these reshufflings in human history have led to armed conflicts. I'm not saying this is what's going to happen, but for sure, the new stance of the US-China rivalry, as exemplified by the posture of Mr. Trump in various areas, including trade, is the sign that globalization has made this world more unstable. Whether or not we like the world being ruled by an hegemon, it's an order. We now have something that looks more like a disorder than an order. Another element has been that there is, with globalization, with the rise of social networks, with the apparition of new political spaces for expression, this connection between socio-economic problems, hardship, frustration, discontent, and the feeling by some that their own identity is threatened, whether it's by digitalization, whether it's by artificial intelligence, whether it's by migrants. This combination of well-known socio-economic problems plus identity threats, feelings, is in many ways much more explosive in political terms than it was the case before, especially if you add to that these people who feel that their identity is threatened usually believe that there is nothing much they can do, that they are the loser in the game, that they have to accept this infra-valued status of losers, and that the system works for the others, which is, of course, a big tank of political energy to move to another direction. So, in many ways, why has the sort of rosy picture I mentioned gone to something which is more black? Basically because after 30 or 40 years of globalization, some believe the world is going in a more dangerous direction than without globalization. This is coupled with what you can see in the news, which is, for instance, serious worries about where we are in the economic world cycle, with rumors, threats of recession, and with, as I already said, the rise of populism, Trump, Brexit, Erdogan, Putin, Duterte, with a clear hardening of the political regime in China. Xi Jinping is very different from his predecessors in the way he envisages the relationship between the Communist Party, the country, and the society. And of course, you have all these protests, which we know flare up now every week, whether it's in Lebanon, in Chile, or in Hong Kong. Now, that takes me to my third and last point, which is, given this state of things, how should we be better at harnessing globalization, it being understood, and this will be my concluding point, that I'm on the side of those who believe that we should better harness globalization rather than go the way to deglobalization. Let me suggest a few avenues, a few paths in order to address the pitfalls of an insufficiently harnessed globalization. First one is about recognizing that the problem we have, or the problems we have, are not so much about globalization as they are about market capitalism in itself. In many ways, if you point the finger at the moon, as the proverb say, don't look at the finger, look at the moon. The moon is capitalism, the finger is globalization. Globalization, in many ways, is nothing but one of the features of today's version of market capitalism. We know this system, we know it's extremely efficient, extremely innovative, but we also know that on top of the fact that it is socially painful, which is something that was addressed at some stages of the evolution of capitalism, it is extremely crisis prone, and this crisis proneness has been extremely leveraged by the financialization of capitalism. We now are in a world where capitalism is not just about those who own capital decide where production should go. It's a system where the layer of financial decisions and the weight of finance on production systems has tremendously increased, which, by the way, led to the 08 crisis. The 08 crisis was not an economic crisis. It was a financial crisis, which then transformed into an economic crisis, which then transformed into a social crisis, and then transformed into a political turbulence. And it's simply that among what globalization should do what we should do in order to harness it, we had not properly addressed the fact that the most globalized part of the economy was the financial industry, and that serious bump into the US system contaminated the whole planet. So capitalism is a problem. I'm not among those who believe that an alternative is for tomorrow, because what has been attempted so far, to be frank, has not been very successful. But I'm convinced that having negative interest rates or looking at the huge amount of share buybacks which you find on the markets, this is, in my view, the negation of capitalism by capitalism. And if the price of the future is what it is today, with the reverse curve on interest rate, or if a lot of companies spend their time buying back the capital to which they cannot find any use except increasing the value of what you earn per share. This is an impasse in terms of economics. So that's something which has to be a question addressed, probably through proper regulation. Second, we of course have to give more room to the environmental threats. We have to recognize that coping with climate change, coping with the biodiversity degradation will not result from a lengthy, incremental, smooth process where production system will slowly adjust to different prices, notably for energy. What we know now is that we don't have much time left. What we know now, as a famous quotation about environment said, and I belong to the generation, we, the first generation to understand the depth of the environmental crisis, and we are the last generation to be able to do something about it. And this is a sense of urgency which I think need to be taken into account in order to react to this degradation. We need a major shift in the way our production systems work. We need a lot of change in the way we produce, in the way we consume, in the way we tax, in the way we redistribute, even in the way we trade. And the amount of change which is necessary needs to be put at its right proportion. Third, I think we also have to recognize that the tech revolution is going to be much bigger in its impact than we presently think it will be. Digitalization, artificial intelligence will totally reshuffle our production systems, our economies, our politics, our societies, and this to a size and with a force which, so far, in my view, is beyond the brain of most politicians, starting, of course, with this huge question about the future of work, which remains one of the essential cement of human society. And fourth, before I conclude, I think we also have to recognize that the global governance deficit, which we now have, needs to be urgently addressed. We have this global governance deficit, which, to simplify, is the distance between what we know about the necessity to address a number of these issues globally, starting with the environment, and the governance capacity which the Westphalian system, which relies on the capacity of 200 sovereign molecules to more or less coalesce in order to get things done. We know that this deficit, for the moment, is too large, especially in a world where, as already said, there is no more hegemony. Even in the discussion we had today at the Pacific Economic Cooperation Council gathering, which the Canadian Tech and the French Tech organized, said from recent discussion he had that it is true that if you look at human history, most of the previous big technological jumps had been done with an existing hegemon. This time, for the first time, they will be done without this hegemon, i.e. without the sort of order which we believe is necessary. And this is why I've been working for quite a bit of time on trying to add to the existing multilateral system something which is more polylateral, what I call polylateralism as opposed to multilateralism. Multilateralism is the modern version of the Treaty of Westphalia. institutions, treaties, according to which these sovereign molecules, who have the sort of monopoly of running international organizations, through interfaces who are called the diplomats, run the affairs of this planet. This system is necessary, but the experience of the last 20 or 30 years is that it's not up to the game which we need in global governance, hence the necessity not to replace it, but to complement it with other approaches to global governance, mainly different stakeholders, not just sovereigns, but sub-sovereign entities, such as cities, for instance, who have a big bearing on many the way we have to change our lives. Civil society organization, business, big academic institutions, lots of other than traditional sovereigns now have the power to influence what is done globally. And the way to do it, if we accept this diversification of the actors of global governance, is to do it more bottom-up than top-down. So instead of agreeing on big principles and big treaties and big notions, you leverage the capacity of people, businesses, cities to coalesce in order to get something done. And the best example of that, and I don't have time to give too many examples, is the way, for instance, HIV/AIDS has been addressed. As long as this issue was left in the hands of official governments, international organizations, it did not work. It started working after there was a big debate in the pharmaceutical industry during many years, whether differential prices were the way to go or not. It started to change where civil society, and not always with the nicest ways of trying to get things done, stepped in sometimes very violently, and it changed at a time where this coalition of some public actors, some private actors, civil society, trade unions, associations of doctors, which were trans-bordered, succeeded in creating a coalition which then focused on how to limit the damage and how to stop the epidemic, worked. That's a good example of why traditional global governance did not work and why new formed. Just compare the composition of the board of the Global Fund and the composition of the UN Security Council to understand the difference between multilateralism and pluralitarianism. And this is where, as the Vice Provost already said a moment ago, this is where we stepped in with the Paris Peace Forum. The Paris Peace Forum, which was initiated by the French president last year at the occasion of the centenary of the First World War, armistice, is a new attempt to try and address this global problem through polylateralism, by gathering initiatives, collecting available energy among people, and notably young people, and then trying to select among these proposals, this project, this initiative, the one that, with the necessary scale-up, which we in the Paris Peace Forum bring, can be successful. So this leads me to my conclusion. We took as a title of this discussion is Globalization Doomed. I will give a typical economist answer. It depends. But going a bit further, I think the fundamental issue is not globalization. Fundamental issue is not whether globalization or deglobalization, but whether we together, in a very complex world, can find a new path, which is not there at present, to economic, social, and environmental sustainability. Roughly what the SDGs, which by the way are a creation of the Westphalian system, which show that sometimes it can produce interesting innovations, roughly what the SDGs incarnate in terms of a common agenda for human people. So, in my view, some elements of deglobalization or relocalization can make sense. In this PEC seminar for the last 2 days, we for instance discussed the impact of this decision which the Chinese government took to ban the import of plastic waste. This has created a major shock in the world economy, which by the way has not really appeared on our screen, but which leads to a relocalization of this production and collection. It probably is the case in some areas of food production, not all by the way, but in some areas of food production, relocalization could make sense. But overall, I believe that outright globalization would probably make it harder rather than easier to achieve this necessary quantum of transformation towards more sustainability, again, economic, social, and environmental, which we absolutely now need. Thanks for your attention. We now have time for questions.
Yes, so we have 40 minutes for Q&A. We're going to do batches of 3 questions. I'm going to moderate. And please always introduce yourself, anything you want to say about yourself. And if possible, I'll start the first 3 questions with students. So you have to step up. All right, so I see 3 right here. All right, so we'll go from right to left. So Hannah, and then go ahead.
Okay.
Mm-hmm.
All right. Yeah, I'm Hannah from the third year political science honors program, and I'm just wondering about technology. So specifically, I'm wondering what you think about how technology can drive globalization by basically reducing transaction costs. But at the same time, we see the nature of technology starting to change today as we get more kind of modes of social media and things like that. So how do you think that these new forms of technology will impact globalization? Because they're not necessarily reducing transaction costs. I mean, some people say that they're creating like echo chambers and things like that, which are actually making us more homogeneous and less diversified and heterogeneous. So how do you think those things are going to impact the future of globalization?
My name's Gwendolyn. I'm also from the third year honors program. My question also has to do with technology.
Yeah. Can you speak a bit louder? I'm getting old.
With technology as well as international development, specifically through China's Belt and Road Initiative. So with the expansion of technology and technological innovations and the democratization of technology, who is best suited to regulate it? Is it a global governance issue? Is it whoever's pushing for the international development? Is it individual regions? Is it states? So who is best suited to regulate it and also impose consequences if there needs to be? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Edwin. I'm first year at the Master of Public Policy and Global Affairs. My question regards somewhat some of the previous work you did in Africa at the World Trade Organization. So the African Continental Free Trade Area came into force on May 30th, 2019, and it's now in its operational phase. Its success partly depends on the willingness of developed economies to build the capacity of African states in overcoming non-tariff barriers such as phytosanitary issues and soft infrastructure issues like internet connectivity. So how can the developed world, and France in particular, support youth and the informal sector in developing, in reducing the non-tariff barriers and reaping the benefits of intra-continental trade? Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so starting with technology. Technology being the way new knowledge penetrates into the economies, thus impacting production systems, consumption systems, plus the sort of cultural layer which is above these infrastructures. What we know is that it has always led to a reshuffling, change. But what we know also is that it never moved back. And it will not move back because the capacity of humankind to increase knowledge is what is specific to humankind. So, brace for changes, disruption, and this has always been the case. If you look at, for instance, at the formidable consequences of the invention of printing on religion, politics in Europe, you can trace the chain that led from the invention of printing to the erection of new religious powers in Europe within the same region, then the demise of some of the previous empires into nations, and then the competition into nations leading to the First World War. Some people would say, oh, the invention of printing was terrible, it led to millions of deaths. It did. Seen with this sequence. But we will never go back. So the issue is not whether technology will be there. It will be there. It will keep changing. And the way our economies are dematerializing are offering easier and larger spaces for innovation, notably in IT. So the question is how you use it, and rightly so. Why, how, which level, in which direction, for how long should it be regulated? Should human societies, through the collective arrangements they find to pursue their collective preferences, how should it be regulated? My own answer to that is that a lot of that will have to be regulated globally. Although, for instance, we know that in IT, we will not globalize the way we globalize in medicines, or cars, or shirts, or shoes. And the reason for that is that as the economy dematerializes, the ideological sensitivity to the new developments is higher. The Chinese, the Europeans, the Americans do not have the same collective preferences about data regimes. In China, it's a property of the state. In the US, it's something which you market. In Europe, it's a fundamental individual right. These ways of looking at the impact of technology will make it very unlikely that we will globalize the data regime on this planet. So the question then is, short of having a single regulatory system, how do we organize a coexistence of the system that allows as much as possible of interoperability, while legislation and regulation about the storage of data, about accessibility of data, about privacy of data will be different. Now, if you take the example of artificial intelligence, we know full well that using artificial intelligence will necessitate precautions. And so far as machines will take decisions, the conditions under which machines take decisions need to be framed within some sort of philosophical or moral mold or frame. Should this be done locally? Should it be done globally? Obviously, as much as we can do globally will help cashing in the benefits of economies of scale and globalization in this field, although we know that we might bump into different preferences. Look at the debate which we've had in Europe and elsewhere on this planet on if you have a car without driver, how will the car react to the crossing of a pedestrian, whether it's a pregnant woman, whether it's a child, whether it's an old person, whether it's a normal person? You open a whole bunch of political and philosophical choices which need a collective approach. So the answer to the question is technology will move forward, but we will not save the fact that we have to make our own decision on how to use it. On Africa, let me nuance your starting point. Yes, the Africans have decided that they should move to a continental free trade area. Deciding you should move to a continental free trade area and getting there are two different things. And the notion that Africa is now a free trade continental area is just not true. It might become true in 20 or 30 years. I happen to believe it's a good thing. My own view, for what it's worth, is that the worst legacy of Western colonialism in Africa was borders. Transforming this continent into 54 sovereign nation states was a huge historical blunder, not least because independence and decolonization happened with a software which was nationalist one. Most of decolonization movement did not happen because decolonization was a good thing or a bad thing. It happened because national sovereignty, national identity had to be restored, including in countries where there had been zero national identity, like in Africa, or, by the way, other parts of Asia, although the frame is a bit different. Now, what is true in these conditions is that African integration is a must, and no way Africa will develop the way it has to develop in order for economic development to win the ship race against the demographic development, which is the big problem of Africa. No way it's not going to happen without integration and the creation of markets which are to the size of what globalization makes relevant in today's world. How can others help this happening? Basically through investment. The big constraining bottleneck to African growth today is infrastructure. The fact is that so far there is not enough financial resources available to be invested in building the proper level of African infrastructures, transport, in the digital economy. The fact that there is a huge flight of capital out of Africa does not help, by the way. That's another consideration. So that's the main thing which can be done. And in my view, and I'm working on that with the European Commission to frame what will succeed the present arrangement between EU and Africa, which is the Cotonou arrangement, which dates from 20 years ago. In my view, the main thing we, at least in Europe, can do is to help reducing the risk premium which exists if you invest in Africa. I mean, overall, on average, if I'm an average investor and I invest an average money in an average place on this planet, I will ask for 10% return on equity. Average. Africa is 15%. So there is a 50% risk premium if you are an average investor and you want to invest. And this leads to quite a large amount of investment that should be done in other places which are not done in Africa. This, in my view, is the main problem. The rest is notably trade-wise. The challenge, which is not specific to Africa, but which is common to all developing countries, in the future to be able to match the rise of precaution in developed societies. This is the problem they will have to face, notably in order to integrate the world economy. We are moving trade-wise from a world where obstacles to trade were about protecting producers from foreign competition for a variety of reasons, not least because, as I said, it can be a bit painful to remove them. But we are moving to a world where obstacles to trade lie in discrepancies in the way you protect consumers. And of course, addressing these discrepancies is a totally different ballgame from the traditional way of opening trade we've known since roughly the Second World War.
So let's take the second batch, please, ready. We'll pick on those sides. So in the very back, there, and then one here. Go to the back.
Thank you so much. I'm Daniela. I'm a fourth-year student of honors in political science. So my question is that, so you talked about a current backlash towards globalization because of the social inequalities that it has resulted from this capitalist globalization. So my question is how to address a possible backlash from those benefiting of the capitalist status quo as we reshape globalization to make it more responsive and more sustainable.
Hi, thank you. My question was just, you spoke of rethinking or perhaps restructuring global governance systems, and I was just wondering where the United Nations might fit into this. If you think there are certain structural changes that need to be implemented to change the very the functions and the way the organization works, or if a whole new organization and a whole new system entirely is more what's required to face global challenges.
Okay, you're next.
My name is David, and I study global resource systems here at UBC, and I run a circular economy innovation lab. And you mentioned that there's a distinction between globalization and our current economic paradigm. And I'm wondering if we transition towards a circular economy successfully, and which could implicate a new economic paradigm in itself, what would then be the impact on globalization?
I'll add the one trade economist in the room here until.
There are trade economists everywhere. You cannot escape them.
It's not that bad. So I'm Matilda Bombardini from the Vancouver School of Economics, and one of the big impasses now with China is subsidies. And I'm just wondering if we have been too restrictive. The WTO, the gap before that was too restrictive in limiting and putting a straight jacket on subsidies. And in a way, if the EU has been too sort of absent and left the US to deal with this problem of China's state-owned enterprises, because right now, where we are right now is that it seems like you either fully converge to the sort of capitalism system or we don't go anywhere. That seems like we're not going anywhere with that. So I just want to know if you think we've went too far with that.
Okay, let's assume we succeed in moving the way I suggested we should move through a few ultra beneficiaries of the present globalized market capitalism system will gain more or own less. I don't think this is a serious obstacle. I don't think it's a serious obstacle. And by the way, when you talk to them, quite a large number of them recognize that taxing more than 1% would probably be the way to go. So I don't think the problem is on that side of the political equation. Of course, entrenched forces, vested interests will always try to play the game, including and especially in democratic systems. But I don't think this is a real obstacle. I think the cultural challenge, the capacity of imagination of what we need to do and how we need to do is a much larger obstacle than traditional balance of forces in political system. UN is United Nations, not United People. It's United Nations. Now, of course, the moment the UN starts deciding something, it starts with "we the people." But it's not "we the people." It's "we the nations" who represent people following the 1648 Westphalian model of international governance. So it inevitably is constrained by the fact that it is a union of 200 sovereigns that are deemed to be equal, which is a total farce. Lawyers sometimes like farces of this kind because it has some adjustment. The notion that 200 members of the UN are equal is just absolute nuts. It's a legal fantasy, fiction, a game which may have its merits, but just that shows that that's not the way to go. Not that the UN system is not necessary, not that with the first generation of multi-annual development goal, the MDG, with the second generation of SDGs, it hasn't produced a software of governance that is an innovation, and I totally agree to that. I was one of the fathers of SDG 14 on oceans, for instance, because of the activities I have in this field. So I'm not saying it's useless. I'm saying it has to be complemented by systems which do not depend on the possible agreement or disagreement of 200 diplomats around the table, or even the Security Council, where a few members of the Security Council have a right of veto, which stems from some sort of moment in human history where there were winners and losers, and the winners attributed to themselves a right of veto when they created the UN Security Council. Just that right of veto says a lot about the inevitable limitations of the international existing system. Again, not that we should get rid of this, be stupid, but we have to recognize the limits. It's like, it's like an engine. It has a certain power. You can push it. If it's limited power, it has a limited power. It won't go faster. You have to add something different. On globalization and sustainable development, assuming circular economy is one of the ways to go. I personally believe, but I recognize there is a debate about this, that globalization is perfectly compatible with a more sustainable environmental model. And I even go further in saying that a number of these adjustments will be easier because of globalization and because of the availability through trade of technologies, of goods, of services that you do not produce, provided of course, and that's the big if, in a market capitalist system, provided the relative prices on markets properly internalize today non-internalized environmental externalities, like, for instance, the CO2 price. Assume you put a CO2 price with a magic wand tomorrow on this planet at €100 a ton, which probably would be what economists and science people say we should do in order to adjust our systems, the world will not deglobalize. It will globalize in a different way. But that's also one of the merits of globalization. There's not one model of globalization. If you look at the way trade flows, there are many ways trade can flow depending on how relative prices move. And it still is a global system. And if Saudi Arabia one day looked at how much it was costing to Saudi Arabia to produce wheat in terms of water resources, and they were horrified at the amount of the bill, rightly so, because frankly speaking, producing wheat in the desert with desalination of water doesn't really make sense. They decided they would stop doing this stupid thing, but they haven't stopped eating wheat. They've just gone on international markets because there's wheat on international market, and it's good. Good thing that there's an international market for wheat, because they could get it at a reasonable price. And then the option was available to change their production system. So I'm not saying it's always the case. There will be cases where local production, under certain conditions and under some pricing conditions, may be the way to go. But in many areas, including the diffusion of environmentally friendly technologies, including in services, the fact that you have an open system helps adjusting, whereas a closed system would be more difficult, which is one of the reasons why I think that this deglobalization avenue is not the way to go. On Chinese subsidies, I mean, it's absolutely true, and that's the only point, in my view, on which Trump is right. I think he's wrong on 90% of what he believes about trade and the economy. But I think he's right on one thing, which is that the present system of world trade disciplines do not properly constrain Chinese subsidization. And we have to recognize that, whereas for a long time we thought that China, because of the internationalization of its economy, would slowly move to something which would be more like the market capitalist system, and that was true between roughly the 80s when Deng Xiaoping decided to reopen China and reinsert China in the world economy, to the financial crisis. I mean, during that period, the part of the Chinese economy which was publicly owned moved from 100% to 15%, roughly. Since the economic crisis, and for reasons which had to do with the way they had to cope with the economic crisis, which, by the way, was generated in the US, they have really increased their state-owned sector to 30% of the economy, which, by the way, is a big paradox, because the fact that insufficiently regulated system in the US led China to double its state-owned sector, in many ways can be seen as a paradox. But that's also the way globalization works. Now, this is the problem. Globalization, including the trade dimension of globalization, implies a relatively level playing field. And if the Chinese support 30% of their economy with public privileges, such as money, and the reason why they have this public sector is because they want to support it, you cannot accept a fair competition if you have to compete with the Chinese treasury. Now, the Chinese treasury 30 years ago, nobody really cared. The Chinese treasury today, after 30 years of 10% per year growth, we care, and rightly so. So this is a problem. And the only solution is to increase global disciplines on subsidization. Now, when I talk about this to my Chinese friend, and Yves knows that pretty well, I try to explain to them that look at what happened in Europe in the 60s, when we decided to have a common market. At that time, France had 30% of its economy under state command. Germany, for a reason that had to do with the Second World War, was forbidden of public ownership in the production sector. There was a problem. When we decided we should open trade within the common market, mostly at the time between France and Germany, Germany said, hey, okay to open trade, but I don't want to compete with the French treasury. And the French said, oh, no, that's not your business. Whether we like owning part of our production systems by the state or not, that's not your problem. We decided. And Germany said, okay, I'm not saying you should privatize all this, your decision. But, I will not open trade with you without enough insurance that the fact that you own 30% of your economy does not lead you to unfair subsidization, which then would be a problem for me to compete with you. Then Germany said, let's establish discipline, and that was called state aids at the time. Let's put that in a treaty. If you look at the Treaty of Rome, the part of the European Constitution that is devoted to disciplines on state aid and competition is very thick as compared to a normal constitution. And let's put the monitoring and surveillance of this in the hands of an independent body, which is the European Commission. That's roughly where we are today. If you take an analogy, China is France, Germany is the rest of the world. We open trade, but we want to do it in a way that does not create this feeling that they unduly unlevel the playing field. And that's the way to go. Now, whether China is ready to go in the direction depends who you talk to, but they have recently invented a concept which is very Chinese, which is competitive neutrality, which probably would have been the one the French and the Germans would have agreed as a principle in the 1960s. So I think this is the way to go.
So we have time for another round.
Oh, there's more questions at each round. I mean, I should
5 minutes. So, alright.
So, short questions and I'll give short
Eric, you don't
answers.
have one? Eric, hello. We have one of the author of all big books on globalization, so I want to make sure. Do you have one, Eric, by any way? No? Okay, so in the middle, we'll just take a couple and two here. So quick questions and then we very quick.
Quick answer.
So one, two, three. 1, 2, 3. No, sorry, he had more. He liked it. Yeah, so.
George from NATO. Bonjour, Pascal Lamy. I have a quick question. In your opinion, do you think that consumers or multinational corporations benefit more from international trade?
Right. Simple question.
Well, thank you for sharing with us. I'm Danielle. I'm doing the honors program of International Relations and Policy. And you made a profound point about the relationship between globalization and and market capitalism. And do you think the biggest culprit here is actually the lack of globalization, or is it a matter of misled ideology among the drivers of capitalism that they value deregulation, exclusive information, and heightened risk? And if so, how do you think we can overcome that? Thank you.
Okay, so my name is Clara White. I'm an ecological economist and political scientist. And my question concerns the environmental issues that you have brought forward. And you said that we are the last generation to be able to do something about those issues, and that's going to require major changes that are going to have to be very quick. So that's a big movement to put in movement. Movement. So I was wondering how you think that's going to happen in terms of political regime in the first place, and secondly, how you see the mobilization of the masses around the world, like with the global strike for climate and expansion rebellions and these movements which are grassroots but are found now all around the world, so are also global. I would like to have your view on that. So that's the political regime for those rapid changes and the mobilization of people, particularly young people around the world. Thank you.
And Greta came just before you came here on Friday in Vancouver. So okay. I guess in 4 minutes.
Short answers to these three questions, because I think I already covered part of that in my remarks. Who benefits most from globalization? Is it consumer or is it multinational corporation? Both, including if you are a shareholder of a multinational corporation and you are also a consumer. That's the capitalist system. It's one of its virtues, has, in my view, serious flaws, but it's one of these virtues, that it creates a sort of confusion through economic systems into this anthropological divide between being a worker and being a consumer. Now, there are obvious contradictions, but capitalism is quite good at regulating through its own mechanisms this anthropological divide. Consumers have certainly hugely benefited from trade opening, look at relative prices, but as I said, this of course has a cost in terms of production systems, notably in the West. Those who used to produce t-shirts in Portugal were not really happy with the end of the textile quotas at the end of the EU round. Although, if you look at Europe, with the same trade regime, and it's a good example because it's a scientific condition, same conditions for everybody. Some European countries did very well with the end of textile quotas, others did not. So it's the same trade measure, depending on how you run the impact of that on your own system, including the distribution, you can have very different regimes. So my answer to your question is a qualified both, largely depending on the capacity of domestic systems to offset the violence of change which international trade opening brings. On your second question, I think I already addressed this. Again, in my view, the main problem is not globalization, it's the intrinsic way capitalism works, and this is where a few things need to change. First and foremost, if you take the example of trade, there are ways to green trade, and the Institut de l'Or, which I'm still working with in Paris, Berlin and Brussels, has embarked on a series of publications which you can find on the website of the Institut de l'Or, and which are interesting papers on how should the EU green its trade policy, which in my view is a march following the recent European elections. But this is doable, provided, of course, you gather the necessary energy. By the way, on the previous question about Chinese subsidies, you seem to allude that EU and others have been too passive. That's absolutely right. EU and others have been too passive. US, Japan, EU. But the problem is that the moment you start shrinking the stitches of the nets of discipline W on subsidies, you also catch subsidies in Europe, US, and Japan. And there is a tension between the desire to constrain more China and the reluctance to be themselves constrained in discipline get tougher. Parenthesis. Finally, on what will lead to change of paradigm, which we need in order to redress the way our production systems are impacting the environment, it's pure politics. Politics should and probably will do the tricks. Not that all solutions are there. There are many areas in energy transition which probably benefit from a lot of innovation which is not yet there. But that's the sort of thing which regulation can also address. And if you take the example of waste, for instance, there was a time where people were saying, no, we will never be able to produce waste or to treat waste in such a way that. And then in some countries, the example of Australia, for instance, they decided on a very stringent standard for what should be waste, what the content of waste in mercury, chrome, CO2 should be. There was a big pushback from the production system. They held firm. And then companies started paying people to find solutions to this constraint that they had to cope with, and it worked. So it's not something that's not doable. Simply, you need the political energy to do it. And that, in my view, can only stem in democratic countries from people and votes, and in non-democratic countries by the fact that the leaders of non-democratic countries still listen to what their people want or do not want. Take the example of China and the environment. It's not the love of environment that the Chinese system has adjusted to quite a lot of changes. They just fear that the population will revolt if water, quality of milk, or air pollution in Beijing becomes unbearable.
All right, I know we're being kicked out, so please join me in thanking